Welcome to any and all who've decided to participate. I'm committed to spending the time between 8:30 and 9 p.m. on Sundays to learning Torah, particularly some of the inner dimensions of the Torah that are going to uh, enable us all to um, develop a closer connection to Hashem through His Torah, through the means and the will and wisdom that He packaged in a storybook form. But of course, there's all like similar to any TV series or any book series of fiction. There's the text, and then there's the implicit text, that which is not explicitly stated, but can be implied or can be inferred or extracted from that which is explicitly stated. I guess through some kind of tools, deductive tools, logical tools. And in doing so, you happen to read the same story in a completely new light, and it becomes almost like a new story. It's interesting about, the word Shana for Rosh Hashanah that we just had. Shana is connected to the word shiny, which means like different or unique. But we know Shana is also the second, meaning a copy of the first. So that's really this concept of newness and time, particularly the newness of time and spiritual flux. I guess that's experiencing the time. We would call that consciousness or a level of soul that's distributed on Rosh Hashanah. Every year, Rosh Hashanah is we receive a new allotment for that coming year, but it happens on the same day. So there is some kind of correspondence. The best way to describe it is in a cyclical, but in a coiled, a spiral. So yes, as we go around the cyclical dimension of the time, we do experience a reemergence at the same point, a convergence maybe at the same point, but we're on an elevated plane as we approach the end of days. Okay, I included some texts in I guess I'll put it in the chat group here. Okay, here I'm gonna put the file in the chat group here. This is a Hasidic work from the Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Alter Rebbe. Ultimately, it was compiled by his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, third Rebbe of Chabad. And these are called Maimarim. The simple way to understand Maimarim is it's a new conceptual organization of ideas, Torah ideas, inner dimension Torah, in the inner dimension of Torah. It's a discourse on the inner dimension of Torah. But what makes a mimer distinct from, let's say, something called a sicha, is a mimer is a novel idea, meaning the author is very much, to their own admission, no less, the messenger, the mouthpiece of this pure chachma, as opposed to being an originator. So these are very novel concepts and fundamental, not just to Jews, but to all people who wish to find a greater depth and a greater feeling of closeness to God in their life gradually over time. And the way we do that, there's two ways to do that. We can do that through action, we do that through thoughts. Ultimately, everyone just wants to change how they feel. The fastest way to do that is through both changing your actions and your thoughts at the same time. but you can infiltrate from the inside or the outside. So this way, when you have set times for studying Torah, in addition to it being an obligation, certainly for men, if you don't have any other mitzvah that you're obligated in that moment, mitzvah that, and again, assuming that it's not something that somebody else can do, it's thrust upon you. You're the only one who can carry it out. If that's not the case in that particular moment, then you're obligated to learn Torah all the time. Of course, each according to the level, you have to consult your spiritual guide as to how to gradually work your way up. But my idea, or the way that's worked for me, is to set a small, manageable amount of time and make it stuck in that day and that particular time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Here, we're going to do a half an hour. We're going to make it stuck here. Nothing changes this. And you find that the rest of your life pivots about these set times for Torah, because these are the real times, the real experiences. You get real when you learn Torah. And I hope that's your experience. I'm open to any kind of feedback. And please, raise your hand, unmute if you want to contribute, if you want to read, if you want to contribute, if you want to ask a question. Okay, we're going to start. Ushavtem mayim b'sasun mimayne hayeshu, an adaptation of the mimer found in the Likutei Torah. Okay, the Likutei Torah is the general series of these collections of mimarim, again compiled by the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, which means the elder Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad. One of the most outstanding observances of the holiday of Sukkot in the time of the Holy Temple was the ceremony in which the water was drawn from an underground spring to be poured on the altar. In connection with the holiday sacrifices, this water drawing was considered so auspicious an event that it was conducted with unbounded joy and celebration, known as the Simchas Beis Shoeva, the celebration of the water drawing chamber. The Talmud relates that in addition to singing and dancing, the greatest saints and sages of Israel would juggle fire and perform other tricks in expression of their indescribable exaltation. The Talmud sums it up with the statement, whoever has not witnessed the celebration of the water drawing chamber has never witnessed joy in his life. It's quite a statement. You can imagine, it's interesting about this is October 7th is coming up tomorrow. And I think the Jewish souls that were mercilessly murdered at the music ceremony or the music festival, I believe they were ultimately very high souls that would have been involved in this ceremony had they known, had they been around in that time, or had it been available in their time. I really believe they were certain types of souls that have to express themselves in this very exuberant, elated way. And unfortunately, they didn't have the tools or the knowledge of the Jewish approach to channeling such excitement, such energy. So hopefully, after learning about this, we can all share it with whoever we think might or might not be interested in this kind of topic, and start to craft some tools or some ideals for how best to utilize not just our time, but our overabundance of joy and gladness. Okay, we're going to continue. Even today, although, alas, we no longer are able to pour water on the altar and the Holy Temple may be rebuilt with the immediate coming of Mashiach, okay, we still joyously commemorate the water drawing ceremony with exuberant singing and dancing on the holiday of Sukkot. In fact, the entire holiday is so thoroughly bound up with the theme of sheer, uncontainable joy that the Torah refers to it by the phrase, the season of our rejoicing. Wow. Why is it that the water drawing ceremony is considered such an incredibly joyous occasion? What, after all, is the reason for all the celebration? Another interesting point that wants clarification: the pouring of water on an altar, a ritual performed only on the holiday of Sukkot, may be contrasted with the practice observed throughout the year, including on Sukkot, of pouring wine on the altar. Right. So generally, with the Shlosh Regalim, there's some kind of libation, where we pour some kind of liquid on the altar. For the other two, the Shlosh Regalim, it's wine libation, but on Sukkot, it's water libation. So it obviously begs the question, why water? Why the switch? And then, we can ask why wine, but right now we're going to ask why water specifically. Why the deviation from the other two? and water. The commandment to pour wine on the altar is expressly mentioned in the Torah in several places. Okay, there's your answer. Well, the commandment of pouring water on Sukkot was orally transmitted from God to Moshe at Mount Sinai. Wow. Okay, so there's a distinction already. So we have it in print, in Torah, in the written Torah, which doesn't change. It's not added to, it's not detracted from. But of course has an oral component that goes along with it, lest we would be unable to utilize it at all. How would we know what sound the letters make, what the words mean, etc., etc.? It all goes along with the oral component. But some mitzvos were conveyed to Moshe just by mouth, and they aren't contained explicitly in the text of the Torah. But is it okay? So here we're gonna ask the question, but is it not expressly written in the Torah? Why should this be so? To understand both the above questions, we must examine the underlying spiritual significance of both the wine pouring and the water pouring. Okay, good. So we're going to address those two. Before doing so, it is desirable to clarify a fundamental point of Jewish philosophy. God is, of course, one and indivisible. Yeah, you're not going to get very far in a mimer without coming over this concept. When we say God is one, we don't mean one as opposed to two. We mean one and only. There's not only one God, there's only one thing in the world. There's only one entity in the world. And you're either with him or against him. And if you're against him, you don't exist. It doesn't exist. Yeah, we frequently find, especially in mystical sources, references to this part of God or the part of God or statements to the effect that certain aspects of our worship reflect and connect us with particular levels of God. What is the meaning of this? Okay, so we speak of God in terms of duplicity, right? Elohim, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Elokeinu, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei Echad. So what's Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, what's Echad? I assume we're going to discuss this. The answer is that God, although especially unknowable, desired to reveal himself to us to the extent that we mortals can grasp. And to make this possible, he created us from the start in such a way as to mirror himself. The idea is that by Torah-guided contemplation of our welcome Hodaya ben Shabbat. If you see, in the chat, I put the link or the file actually for this this excerpt from the Hasidic discourse that we're going to be reading. So I'm on the bottom of page 1, and we just introduced the idea of on Sukkot we have the water libation, where there was a great celebration in the Beis Hamikdash where they were pouring water on the altar. And they said, there was a statement of the sages that said, if you haven't experienced Simchas Beis Shoeva, which was this celebration, then you haven't experienced true joy in your life, meaning that this is the ideal level of elation and joy. Everything else will pale in comparison. Okay. So now we have to understand what is the significance of the water libation and what is the significance of the wine libation. Okay. So we have to, and then we fundamentally discussed the idea of God's unity and indivisibility. God is one, and not one as opposed to one or two, one as opposed to is nothing. God is the only entity that exists. It's not that there's a God, he's up there and we're down here. There's only God. Everything is of God. Even which denies God, which is in a lot of ways a much deeper level of God. Okay. So we're going to keep going. The answer is that God, although essentially knowable, desired to reveal himself to us to the extent we mortals can grasp. And to make this possible, he created for us from the start in such a way as to mirror himself. The idea is that by Torah-guided contemplation of our own makeup, which is basically an analogy to God, we come to appreciate to some extent something of God himself. Yeah. So it's similar to like the film. In the old days, when in movie theaters, they used to have film projected onto a screen. If you wanted to get close to what was actually going on, you wouldn't go up to the screen, you go up to the film that's in the projector in the back room. And through that, you can kind of understand something about what's going on the screen. So to hear God, in a way, projected himself into man, and through understanding ourselves via the Torah, we can understand God. Created us from the start in such a way to mirror himself, the idea, okay. But Torah-guided contemplation to make it, which is basically we can appreciate God to some extent, something of God himself. This is the inner meaning of the statement that God created mankind in his image, and of the verse, from my flesh I perceive God. Right. So we're implored to do so. We're implored to, and if you ever contemplated, I mean, people who've experienced the miracle of birth, of giving birth, they've come, face to face with this idea of meeting divinity in their own selves or in a close family member, etc. In this case, the following analogy, though necessarily inexact, may help us understand the idea of different levels of God. A human being is one individual, to be sure, but a multifarious individual nonetheless. Each person has many different aspects to his or her personality, a whole range of likes and dislikes, emotions and attributes that together make up the whole. Yet clearly, they are all part of a single undivided person. And on a deeper level, we can speak of a person as having a single core, an elusive point, which is the very essence of their personality, their very self. At this level, everything comes together, or more accurately, everything else proceeds from this point, but the indefinable point of the self cannot be divided into different parts. Okay, so we're saying at a certain point, I don't know if anyone's ever had like a favorite sweatshirt or a favorite blanket, let's say, and what happens over the years through the wear and tear, it starts to de-thread, I don't know, or come apart. And at a certain point, it ceases to be a blanket, and it's just a loose, I don't know, a loose like sheet of like threads. It's no longer a blanket. So we're saying at there's a certain point within the individual where that singularity is their what we call their essence, where if we were to, well, first of all, we couldn't break that up anymore. We couldn't get any more refined than that level. That's their most generalized, most godly part, most rarefied. And ultimately, that is what generates our mind and emotions. When considered from someone else's perspective, an individual's various personality traits are a part of that individual. However, from the internal perspective of the person's own inner self, his or her very soul, each individual personality trait, generosity or stinginess, intelligence or dullness, is by no means the definition of the person, of the soul, but a mere manifestation or outward reflection thereof. That point of self remains indivisible. Right. So you can consider like this. There's electricity that comes into your house. It goes into a circuit breaker or a board with circuit breakers, and then it's divvied up in particular measures to the refrigerator, to the bathroom lights, the upstairs bathroom lights, to the garage door opener, etc. At a certain point, the general power has to be downgraded or limited to be useful to the specifics of the house. So if we but all you have to do is trace the specific to its source of generalized power, and then eventually you'll find yourself climbing up the telephone pole outside your house at the transformer box. If you have electricity coming in through a transformer box, or it's underground. Regardless, there is a general point where the power is you can't plug in your phone to that circuit breaker directly. It has to be downgraded and made specific for an outlet, etc. So we're saying so too with the self. There's a part of the self that's so generalized, that's so powerful, that we can't connect to that directly. How do we connect to it? We connect to it through the medium of the personality, or in more Hasidic terms, we would say the seichel and the midos. That's where the soul ultimately splits. These are the two main auxiliary outputs of the singular soul. Of course, there's 5 dimensions of soul, but assuming we're talking about the soul as a single general entity that connects us to God, it's like a chelek Elokai mimal. As we know, God blew into us a living soul, and ultimately that is manifest within the individual. Meaning, when you're thinking about yourself, it's manifest through 2 main ports, through the seichel, which is the intellect, and the midos, which is the emotions. And generally speaking, the organ or the physical fleshy matter that receives and conducts these electrical impulses are called the moichin and the lev in the heart, the brain and the heart. Brain ultimately produces thoughts. The heart ultimately produces feelings. And together, when managing those 2 inputs correctly, you make a mensch, or you make a b'nai and bas Torah. Ultimately, these are your 2 points of influence on how one ultimately behaves and conducts themselves in the world. But if you were to say they are their personality, I'm not sure that would be correct. I would say, why stop there? Why not go all the way back to the source? They're a piece of God. Okay, at this level, everything comes together remarkably, everything else proceeds from that point. Okay, so that's what we said. I'm going to go now to the second paragraph on page 2. What is more, a person's various emotions and character traits are not all equal. By the way, if anyone wants to read, by all means, just unmute yourself or type in the chat, and you can read or ask a question and make a comment. By all means, we're going to go until 9 o'clock and then pick up another day. Although they coexist within the person at the same time, some are relatively superficial aspects of the personality, while others, closer, as it were, to the core, to the self, are deeper. Any given act a person does may be said to have been motivated by a particular level of the personality. For example, a person may enjoy skiing, but this activity and the appreciation of it are relatively superficial aspects of a person's total character. Right. People say, "What? Who are you? What are you?" "Oh, I'm a skier." Well, really, are you? No, you're a human being. What does that mean? It means you're a. See, there's a distinction people have to make. Are we animals having a spiritual experience, or are we spiritual beings having an animal experience? I would say the latter. Ultimately, you have to choose. But I believe your one's habits and actions are going to be greatly influenced and perhaps even determined by how they identify. Are they primarily, there's a concept of Judaism, Iker and Teufel. Iker is the essence, and Teufel is the secondary, the kli, the vessel that contains the essence. The vessel is secondary, and it's bittul. It's nullified to the essence. If the essence goes away or the contents go away, if you have a cup of yogurt, one of those yogurts where you peel off the top, if there's no yogurt in the cup, it's very rare that you'll find anybody giving any value to the cup, because the cup only serves the yogurt in as much as the yogurt needs to be carried for whatever function, to be eaten, to make a bracha on, to eat, elevated, etc. But as soon as the yogurt is no longer present, then the cup has to find another use, or it goes away. But when the cup is doing its role, being secondary to the contents of the cup, then the cup gets to be included within the essence, in terms of we can call that whole thing the yogurt. If there's yogurt in that cup, well, it's sealed, we can say that's yogurt and point to it and touch the cup without even touching the inside or pointing to the inside and say that's yogurt, assuming there's the essence, the contents are within the cup. Okay. A student may be worried about an upcoming test and devote much time and energy to preparing for it. The activity is motivated by concern, which is deeper rooted within the person than their enjoyment of skiing, as evidenced by the fact that the student will, if necessary, forgo a skiing trip in order to study. And if the person learns that a sick friend is calling for them from the sickbed, they will respond from deeper still within themselves, even neglecting their study in order to care for the friend. So we'll see that ultimately everything you think you want can be refined. Every specific thing in the world you think you want can be refined with a little bit of enticing or crafty marketing. God created us in this way to reflect the way he relates to us. God, although indeed one and indivisible, God as he exists in his essence is the only thing that exists. God has chosen to manifest himself to the universe similar to the way in which a person's personality traits manifest of the person's inner self on a number of levels, and the above analogy helps us to comprehend something of how this works. It also helps illustrate how we can tap into various levels of godliness through performance of mitzvahs. So God ultimately has a desire, similar to we have desires. We need to go to work, we need to go to sleep, we need to eat. These are ultimately to satisfy some kind of wanting or craving in the body, some kind of longing for something. And then once we have it, it either subsides or it lessens in intensity. But God is absolute, and therefore his desires are absolute. God's desires are the performance of the mitzvahs, for whatever reason. Also, something to know, we can't ask why when it comes to desire, will. Because why is a question for intellect, and will is higher than intellect. And I'll prove it to you. If I say, what kind of flavor ice cream do you like? And you say vanilla ice cream, ultimately, and the therapists might, analytical therapists might get very upset with this notion, but because they make a lot of money off of it. I know they're well-meaning, of course, and they help a lot of people. I'm just saying, in the traditional style of analytical therapy, where we would attempt to try to understand your desires. No, your desires are what your desires are. You can curb them. You can work on curbing them, which is basically restraining the flow, the influx as it comes into your brain and heart before it is expressed in your thought, speech, and deed. But ultimately, what your desire is not something that we have control over. Now, you can refine your desire. You can which is what we're doing through learning Torah. We can say, well, I really just want to eat ice cream and watch Netflix or watch YouTube videos all the time. But that's really just my desire to experience pleasure. I think that means pleasure. Well, what if being connected to God is a greater pleasure? Well, if that's the case, then I would pursue that. So there's a refining process. People who used to be unhealthy and out of shape, and then they have some kind of precipitating event or a health episode, and they go to the hospital, God forbid, or they get very sick, and then they decide that it's no longer pleasurable for me to be living the way I was living, and now it's pleasurable for me to go to the gym and eat healthy. Something that wasn't pleasurable became pleasurable. Why? In light of new information. So the mind can be used to ultimately refine the will, but ultimately what the will is when it comes in is a singular and predetermined cause. However, we're going to learn through Chassidus, and I'll give you a little spoiler alert as we finish up this first session. There's only one desire, and that desire is, well, let's logically approach it. I want ice cream. Well, really, I want to feel good. Well, really, I want to feel like I matter, like I'm useful, like I have something that's eternal, something that's not just fleeting and here for the moment and gone the next and forgotten. Okay, so really, I want to be connected to eternality. So really, I want to be connected to the source of eternality. So really, I would just want to be connected to the source of everything. Really want to be connected to God. Really, I want to lose my separate self, my sense of self in the connection to my source in God. Ultimately, that's the source of all desires. And if you tell me, no, I just want to get sushi and go to the movies, I beg to differ. But it's worth exploring. So next time you have a desire, next time you're running to an impulse that is not absolutely necessary. I mean, the fast days are the best days to experiment with this, because we really see how programmed we become when we don't keep ourselves in check in terms of our even the permissible, even kosher food. Say, why do I really want to eat? Well, I want to either escape or I want to experience some level of pleasure, something greater than than I feel like I am right now. Well, why do I want that? Ultimately, because I want to lose my sense of self in the experience of an eternal and wholly meaningful experience. Okay, so we'll end it there for today. Thank you very much to anyone who participated. I'm just going to keep going. I don't know how many people show up. Hopefully people will contribute either in the chat or send me a message if they weren't able to. But I'm going to keep going. Like I said, when I make set times, I keep them with set times for Torah, I keep them. So I'm going to keep this time 8:30 to 9 p.m. on Sundays, and then potentially add another day during the week. But for right now, we'll keep it to Sundays. Okay. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your week, and a Gemara Chasima Tova.